So first of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, the Day, and the Chamber of Commerce here in Eastern Connecticut for hosting this debate. My name is Andre Baumgartner. I'm running for a state representative here in the 41st District. It'd be an honor to be a representative for multiple reasons, but I think we'll go over that over the course of the next hour. But I think we can all agree that right now Connecticut's at a crossroads. We have the ability right now to articulate a vision in Hartford that is conducive to business growth, taxes that are leveled, and that so that our middle-class families and working-class families don't have to see the same tax increases year after year. But right now, that's not happening. We've seen the largest tax increase in state history in 2011, and tax increases year after that. And so I think we really need to make some fundamental decisions about how we move forward and what kind of representation we get. More energized representation, advocacy, and an individual who is cognizant of the needs of the district, of all individuals in the district. I think we'll see very stark differences, and I'm very blessed and honored to be participating in this debate, and I hope I can count on your support when this is all said and done. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
Thank you, Lisa. I want to also thank the League, the Day, and the Chamber for organizing and hosting this event. It is an honor to represent the 41st District in the General Assembly, and I am very proud of my track record as an effective legislator and the progress we have made to help grow the economy and jobs in our state, to protect and increase municipal aid and education aid in order to help hold the line on property taxes, to invest in high-quality education, including our technical high schools, community colleges, to prepare the workforce for tomorrow, and protect Long Island Sound, our coastline, and the environment. I've played a pivotal role in creating the Connecticut Port Authority and investments in our commuter and freight rail transport, and look forward to making New London the epicenter for transportation in New England. In securing more than $6 million for Grasso Tech high school upgrades, in our state's demonstrated commitment to preserve the Naval Submarine Base and the important role that it plays in our economy, in launching the Connecticut Institute for Resiliency and Climate Adaptation at UConn Avery Point, and other programs to help protect our coastline from storm damage and flooding, and in promoting a Thames River Heritage Park and implementing a successful water taxi project across the lower Thames this September. I'm a lifelong resident of Groton. I've served on the Groton Town Council, the RTM, the Board of Education. I understand the complexities and challenges facing municipal government. I've been involved in protecting some of our most precious resources. I would like to...
Thank you. A number of people have submitted questions regarding the economy. They want to know what each of you would do to help bring economic growth back in the region. Mr. Baumgartner, would you answer first?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's pretty deplorable that in the last year alone, we've seen a net loss in 2,400 jobs in southeastern Connecticut. We're in our 6th year of recession. Now, I think any individual who has some common sense will tell you that something clearly is not working. Our leaders in Hartford go up to Hartford and support these tailor-made tax credits and these forgivable loans for these large corporations. When they get these, this corporate welfare to an extent, there's no requirements attached to a lot of this job creation. For example, UTC, which was one of the largest employers here in Connecticut, will be receiving well over $400 million in corporate welfare, and a lot of that money is not going to necessarily. They can still receive that money even if they don't create, meet their level of jobs that's required of them. So right now, I think we need to focus on really 3 things. Making sure that we have a corporate tax structure that's really conducive to those large corporations coming in for everybody, not just for certain corporations. Number 2, we need to make sure that we have a real red tape review so that our small businesses aren't facing these sort of frivolous fees that they see every day. And third is making sure that all of these policies that work are used in our cities, so that really our cities like Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and New London, which is a part of the district, have the ability to grow jobs in a sustainable way and employ people in those cities. And I don't think this legislature has done nearly enough to make that happen.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
This is exactly where I have focused my efforts, on helping to create and retain jobs, train workers, recruit and retain businesses, and provide the incentives for small businesses to expand. We need to continue and expand the Small Business Express program, which has been very successful in providing assistance to our small businesses to create and retain jobs and grow the economy. Continue the Step Up job training for unemployed persons and Step Up for veterans. Bolster some of the job training programs to match the employment opportunities with workforce needs. For example, at programs at the Grasso Tech, the Three Rivers Community College, all designed to align the workforce needs of tomorrow with the workforce of tomorrow with the employment needs, especially in advanced manufacturing and 3D printing. In addition, we can support business growth through a simpler, fairer tax and regulatory climate, investments in public infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, our roads, bridges, passenger and freight rail, and our ports, our power infrastructure, electric grids. Part of the energy revolution is to provide an abundance of clean energy to help our economic recovery and lead to manufacturing resurgence and a creation of jobs. Investing in education also is the foundation of education of economic success. In technology and innovation at our public universities and other institutions, and through worker education and training systems. The Three Rivers just received a $1.3 million federal grant for metals manufacturing employment to work with employers in the region. This is the kind of educational alignment with the workforce needs of tomorrow that we need to promote and expand.
Thank you. The second question comes from the audience. They want to know what you will do about reducing spending and the amount of taxes people are paying. What would you do to address both of these issues? And Ms. Wright, you go first.
In our budget, the budget that we inherited 4 years ago had a $3.6 billion deficit, and we have closed that gap through a combination, a balanced approach, including reductions in the size of government, over $700 million in government spending. We have incurred no new debt to finance operating expenses, and all the while maintaining state aid to municipalities and increasing aid to education, rather than putting more pressure on communities to raise property taxes. We have increased pilot payments to municipalities by $8 million this year. We have increased education aid to municipalities. I think it's $48 million this year. This past 2 years, the budget year has ended in surpluses. The rainy day fund now totals $519 million. I think we need to continue to tighten our belt. We are bending the cost curve down on our long-term pension obligations for state employees and teachers in retirement. One of my main focuses is to continue to work to limit property tax, to provide property tax reform and relief through measures such as an enhanced circuit breaker program to limit property taxes liability based on household income and ability to pay, by reopening the property tax freeze for seniors, enacting a homestead exemption, and increasing revenues to municipalities including increasing the state's share of K-12 funding. These will all help improve the competitiveness of our region and the state by reducing property tax burdens and improve and enhance our competitiveness in the global economy.
Thank you. Mr. Baumgartner?
Well, I think we heard Representative Wright go on and on and on about how the legislature and the Governor Malloy has used gimmicks upon gimmicks to cover up really poor policy making in Hartford when it pertains to our budgets. It's inherently untrue that the state of Connecticut right now is operating its budget without any monies that were borrowed from the bonding commission and rated from various funds in our budget. The Special Transportation Fund, for example, which is a fund that revenues that are made by one are fees associated with the DMV and also gas. Year after year, the legislature raids that fund to pay for operating budget shortfalls, and those practices are the reason why people are so disenfranchised by Hartford. So in terms of making specific cuts or spending reductions, I think it's very difficult in this legislature, in part because we have 153 House districts and 36 state Senate districts that all want a little piece of the pie. So I think to an extent it's very difficult for any one of us right now to say where we would specifically cut and if that were even possible. But I think right now we just have too much dishonesty in Hartford, and we send our legislators to Hartford who make these sort of wonderful talking points, but their numbers don't back it up. So for example, this past fiscal year, we had a governor and a legislature that said that they were going to have a balanced budget. Well, quite frankly, many legislators here, actually in our own district, took issue with that, including our own Senator Andy Maynard, who very eloquently pointed out that we did not have a surplus. And what did the governor do and the legislature promise? They wanted to hand out these $55 rebates, and they couldn't even fulfill that promise. So I think we really owe it to the hardworking taxpayers in this district to make sure that when we go up to Hartford, we support budgets that don't have any gimmicks and that hold the line on spending and taxation, because people around here are struggling. And I'm not sure if right now Representative Wright is very cognizant of that.
Thank you. The next question starts with you, Mr. Baumgartner. This is from the audience. What would you do as our state representative to change the racial imbalance in the schools?
Absolutely. Well, I think right now, and I spoke about this very briefly in my opening statement, but when it comes to education policy here in the district, we're really at a crossroads. If you sort of look at what's happening in both Groton and New London, where in New London you've seen a district that's taken over by the state and now moving to an all-magnet school model system. And in Groton, where we continuously have these racial imbalance problems, in part because of a very transient population, say, with our subbase and some urban characteristics within our community. So I think most importantly, we need to take a look at what kind of education outcomes we provide our students. I think New London going to an all-magnet school system is great. I'm the product of a magnet school system here. I went to the Regional Multicultural Magnet School in Isaac. And I think having those educational opportunities for me made a world of difference, and I think every child in this district deserves a quality education. What we're seeing in the state right now is, really a Hartford and legislators that are completely out of touch with really the needs of students and teachers. Teachers have been frustrated with the implementation of Common Core and also, the tests that are associated with that. And children, I think to an extent in our school systems right now are struggling with, having to be prepared for all these tests, but not necessarily getting the tools they need to be successful people in life. And I think that shows really, again, our legislature that is really out of touch with really, working people here in this district. And, I'm curious to see what Representative Wright says about that.
Thank you. Representative Wright?
Yes, I think achieving racial balance in our schools is a very, very important goal. It's a laudable goal, and we should not lose sight of that overarching goal. Magnet schools have been a very successful strategy in achieving that goal. Where we get in trouble in Groton and other diverse communities is the racial imbalance law, which requires the racial balance in each school to reflect the racial balance in the entire community. And when this is more difficult to achieve in a diverse community like Groton and a few other diverse communities in the state, than it is in communities where the population is more homogeneous, because the ratio in the schools is measured against the ratio in the community. So while Groton has and a few other communities that are similarly situated have struggled for many years with achieving those balances. I think we should think about testing the racial balance in schools in a broader geographical area, a regional basis, because that gives a truer picture of the racial composition in an entire region. And I think the legislature should begin to revisit our racial imbalance laws with that in mind. It would be a fairer and probably a more successful way to achieve the laudable goal of educational equity and racial imbalance in all of our schools.
Thank you. Did you
Yes,
want to say something?
I'd like to have a rebuttal. A couple things. I think first, it's important that if obviously there's a state statute in place that sort of mandates a district to do something, that unfunded mandate is funded. And what you've seen year after year is the legislature completely underfunding on the ECS formula. And an underfunded ECS formula translates to underfunded schools in Groton and underfunded schools in New London. Groton and New London schools have a unique set of issues, in part because of its urban population. And I think it's imperative that we have leadership in Hartford who, one, has lived through those experiences of what it means to have a really quality education in the district, but will also fight for it. And I don't think we're getting that fight right now with Representative Wright, who, I'm curious to see again if she's in legislative testimonies or hearings have talked about reforming the ECS formula and potentially, and I know we see eye to eye on this issue, but supporting a 100% reimbursement for special education expenditures, because quite frankly, our property taxes have to pay a significant amount for our schools, local schools, and it's important that we provided fantastic opportunities for really children with special needs. And if Hartford obviously is mandating that they get the best kind of education they should get, they should absolutely fund it from the state. So I think, again, we need to mitigate on a lot of these unfunded mandates that we're putting on our municipalities for school districts. And I think if there's really area where the state has the capacity to pay for these things, it's clearly our education. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything else, or you?
Well, yes, I have long felt and I believe strongly that the state should honor its commitment to fund at least 50% of the cost of education in each municipality, and do more if at all possible, and relieve the school districts of the cost of special education. and make special education portable. We do not have the revenues at the moment. The revenue impact is quite large. I think I'm not sure the figures, it's $2 or $3 billion, I'm not sure. But that education, if you talk about unfunded mandates, the underfundedness of education, public school education, is probably is the largest of the underfunded mandates. And absolutely, the state should provide more resources to the school districts. That's the largest expenditure in municipal budgets. It's a very, very important investment that we make in their future, in our economic success and our shared prosperity. I think we need to look at closing some of the tax expenditure loopholes, some of the sales tax loopholes from online remote sales transactions. It's estimated, I think, that if Congress were to enact the Marketplace Fairness Act, it would translate to considerable revenues to the state of Connecticut. And in there, we have about almost $6 billion in tax expenditures, and sales exemptions, and that we really, as Representative McCowsher has been a very strong advocate of greater transparency, and I have too, in those tax expenditures, which is backdoor spending. And many of them are scrutinized, but many of them are not. And I think we need to be more proactive in scrutinizing those tax expenditures, and with the goal of providing more resources so that we can devote to education.
Thank you. On a whole other topic, and this one is for you first, Ms. Wright. Do you support the gun law that was passed in the wake of the Newtown shooting, or should it be repealed? Short of repeal, what changes, if any, would you propose?
I did support the gun control legislation. It contains many reasonable bipartisan measures. And it was a thoughtful bipartisan response to the tragedy at Sandy Hook. Those measures include universal background checks, increasing the penalty for firearms trafficking, requiring schools and colleges to create security plans, an expansion of state mental health services, and the addition of a mental health professional to the firearms permitting board. Like any law, we should continue to evaluate to ensure that it's achieving its goals. In addition, I believe we need to restrict plastic guns, such as those produced on 3D printers, which can more easily get through security systems unnoticed. And that would be a modification that I would support.
Thank you. Mr. Baumgartner?
Well, I think right now in the state, what we're seeing, I've been trying to keep tabs on what's happening on TV with these TV ads with many of our candidates running for statewide office. But I think what you're seeing right now is really, I think to an extent, Representative Wright and many other individuals in her party who are trying to really vilify law-abiding citizens in Connecticut. And I think right now, we're doing a real disservice to really individuals who have always honored and respected the Second Amendment throughout the state. And I think to an extent, as you can have heard, Alyssa Wright would have added to the bill. And I think right now we really should be talking about what we can do to address mental health. And I don't think that was addressed well enough in the bill. And I think to an extent, the process that SB 1160 went through was not fair, in part because of sort of a provision, it's called e-certification, which rushes a bill through the legislature. Now, it was completely appropriate of the legislature to have an emotional response to the tragedy in Newtown. It's a tragedy that obviously will be with the state forever, and we need to make sure, again, that the first priority for any individual in the legislature is talking about ways to make sure that every individual in this state has the services they need to be to live. And I don't think any of us can say that right now if we take a stroll through every part of this district, because mental health issues are with all of us. We all know an individual with it. So I think right now, rather than trying to vilify, again, law-abiding citizens, we need to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question goes to you first. A member of the audience would like to know, do you support hunting on Sunday?
Yes, I do. And I think to an extent, a lot of individuals in this district and statewide really, again, are silenced, and they can't necessarily really just in our again, our district, a lot of individuals again would like to be able to use their firearms in order to hunt and put food on the table. And I think right now, I think that would certainly be a good start, because I think, again, it's completely unfair to really law-abiding citizens to have to really, in just Connecticut right now, be forced to, be victimized and, labeled as criminals. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
No, I have not supported Sunday hunting. I think that there should be one day when the public can enjoy the outdoors, free of that activity. So I have not supported Sunday hunting bills that have come before the legislature.
I'd like to say something real quick. Now, again, I think it's really important that when we elect an individual to the seat, that the goals of that legislature is to make sure that we return jobs back to southeastern Connecticut. And I think by sort of talking over and over again about SB 1160 is sort of I've said this, we've lost 2,400 jobs in southeastern Connecticut, and to again focus on something or trying to further restrict the rights of law-abiding citizens should not be the priority of anyone. So again, we need to really reprioritize what we're talking about in Hartford, and I would be really, again, the individual who would make sure that the needs of the district are well articulated.
Thank you. Let's proceed with that general area of thought. What would you say should be the 3 top legislative priorities to encourage economic growth and job creation? Ms. Wright, you go first.
Well, first of all, there is no issue of a greater importance and urgency than finding a solution to the economic issues in the state and getting the economy of our region and the state back on track. This will involve helping people find well-paying careers and jobs, continuing programs to provide assistance to small businesses, giving them the incentives that they need to help them grow, create and retain jobs, and train workers, programs like the very successful Small Business Express and Step Up trainings programs. I was very active and instrumental in getting the state to refocus attention and energy and resources in promoting bioscience innovation in southeastern Connecticut. We're already seeing some of the fruits of that initiative in the bioscience innovation space, in one of the vacated Pfizer buildings, as well as the new State of Connecticut IT data center in one of the other buildings. We need to continue the momentum in bioscience and also in the crucial area of transportation, by improving our marvelous deep water port in New London through the efforts and initiatives of the new Connecticut Port Authority. I understand the working group for the Port Authority has met today for the first time, and so I'm looking forward to working with them and realizing the economic potential more fully of New London as a transportation hub for shipping, for freight rail, for commuter rail. I was instrumental in the extension of Shoreline East to New London from Old Saybrook, and the expansion of service to weekends, and look forward to working further to further extend our commuter rail to New London, to Mystic, and eventually to connect up in Rhode Island with the MBTA to provide continuous commuter rail service from New York to Boston seamlessly, which will help the economy of our region, will help grow tourism. And I think another very promising initiative is the Thames River Heritage Park that I have been very active in promoting and working to develop. The water taxi demonstration project was very successful, and I think demonstrates the potential of using the Thames River as a water highway to transport people back and forth, and eventually, hopefully, up and down the river by ferry. Relieve congestion on the highways. It's another form of mass transportation, improve air quality, and the like. So I think there are a number of fronts in terms of moving our economy forward through investing in education, through our transportation infrastructure, and our workforce development and support for small business growth.
Thank you. Mr. Baumgartner?
Well, I think Connecticut needs to get out of the business of picking winners and losers and really get into the business of making sure that there's an environment where all businesses can flourish. And what you see with the Small Business Express program and the First and Next 5 program is that it's more of your hard-earned dollars going to, again, to these corporations that really may not meet these standards or requirements for job creations and still pocket these dollars. So I think we really need to take a look at, again, our tax structure for all businesses, and we can start with the business entity tax, which is a tax that just exists to exist. And we, again, need to make sure that really our small businesses aren't dealing with just taxation that impedes on their growth. For example, personal property taxes. It doesn't make any sense to me why really a business, especially a business that is starting up and purchasing their products, is forced to again pay a tax on it just because. So I think again we need to relook at how we're regulating and taxing our companies across the board, because clearly something isn't working. Again, a lot of what Representative Wright is articulating is, again, supporting, again, the Small Business Express program, which, again, picks winners and losers, and not every small business gets those opportunities. So we need to take a comprehensive look as to why we're not meeting these job creation numbers that we need to look at. And when 48% of Connecticut residents say they no longer want to live here, there's something clearly wrong. And I'm not sure why our representatives in Hartford just don't get it. So again, we need to make sure that all businesses can really survive in this environment. And when you look at our assets, we have a deep water port, we have an Amtrak rail line that is accessible. We can access Boston, New York, D.C. There's a tremendous amount of wealth around here, and here in southeastern Connecticut, year after year, we see buildings coming down, more buildings coming down than going up. So again, we need legislators who really have the passion to really have the energy to just be involved in the conversation and speak to our small businesses. And once we really have an idea of what kind of relief they need, then we can legislate. And so I would not support sort of continuing the status quo of more money being thrown in projects and that simply are not sustainable.
Thank you. Along the lines of a couple of things that the two of you mentioned, comes this revenue and transit question. Number one, would you support tolls as a means of raising revenues on the state's highways and supporting mass transit systems? And secondly, what would you do to propose easing the congestion on Interstate 95? Mr. Baumgartner, you're first.
Absolutely. So again, we have a completely broken transportation system. My opponent, Representative Wright, has supported year after year to raid the Special Transportation Fund to pay that diverts funds from the Special Transportation Fund to the General Fund to pay for operating expenses in the General Fund. When really the state of Connecticut has the second number of just the highest amount of roads that are ranked in poor condition, clearly we're doing something wrong. So I think most importantly, we need to really put a lockbox, almost constitutional amendment banning the practice of shifting those funds, and then we can have a conversation about tolls. I think it doesn't make any sense sort of economically that we really should be expanding just road capacity if really we're not meeting just the we have congestion between heavy congestion between New Haven and Greenwich, but the problem again there is if they had the option to take a train that actually got to their employers on time, they would take it. And I think it's very important that we head that direction. If we look at really our most robust urban centers, Boston, New York, they really have very strong transportation options, and what that means is if less money, people are putting less money in to their car or to just the expenses of commuting, they would have a lot more money in their pocketbooks to shop at restaurants and buy clothing for their family. So again, we need to make sure that we're not raiding the Special Transportation Fund way before we look at sort of congestion pricing or putting tolls on highways. But at the very least, if that were to happen, I would only support perhaps on borders. That way, really out-of-state drivers, we're not subsidizing out-of-state drivers utilizing our roadways. So I'm very much a believer in making sure that if you put money into something, that it'll pay off in the end. And right now, we're just not getting that from our really transportation system like we are getting with everything else in Connecticut.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
I think the time has come when we should seriously consider reinstituting tolls on our highways. The trade-off being a reduction in our gasoline taxes. think all of the other states in New England have tolls. The reason our gasoline taxes are so high is that we do not have tolls. I think we should look at congestion pricing, tolls based on congestion pricing that would encourage a better distribution of use on our highways, reduce usage in peak times, but I think more importantly, we need to increase our investments in mass transit options, in commuter rail, in bus transit, and of course we need to fix it first. We need to fix our bridges and our highways to make sure that they are safe for vehicular traffic. So yes, I think we should consider tolls on a congestion pricing model, with the caveat that the revenues from the tolls would be offset by proportionate reductions in our gasoline taxes.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Now, every legislator is supposed to really support balanced budgets, and year after year, we're not getting it. So really my question to Representative Wright is, if the state right now, next year, we're expecting to, an additional $330 million is going to be added to the budget in part because of the amount we bond, so in debt services. And a large percentage of transportation spending in this state is done through bonding. So think about it. If we're bonding really a ton of money at an exponential rate year after year, and obviously not increasing gas taxes, which disproportionately hits the middle class and working class families, particularly in southeastern Connecticut, who currently don't have those options, such as buses or a water taxi to get from Groton to New London. If those options aren't here right now, why are we talking about looking at more fees and more taxation on people who can't afford it? So at the end of the day, again, if I agree that we need to perhaps look at tolls only on borders if it means that more money is going to go into that special transportation fund. But we need to make sure that we don't rate it to pay for general fund expenditures, and we really need to make sure that if we do raise those fees, that we don't levy it on the people who don't have the capacity to pay right now.
Thank you.
Would
our
I
time?
respond to
Oh,
that,
sorry, you
please?
wanted.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I think that capital improvements in our transportation infrastructure are an entirely appropriate use of bonding funds. As a point of interest, the vast majority of our outstanding bonded debt is attributable to school construction funding for our municipalities to build new schools and renovate their schools so that our children have a safe and secure and modern and appropriate environments in which to learn. If the state, this outstanding indebtedness of the state is $20.4 billion. And I think 2/3 of that is attributable to school construction bonding. So if the state did not bond for school construction aid, that burden would be borne by the municipalities.
And real quick, we are bonding to pay for operating expenditures in the general fund, and when you have a situation where we're always shifting these monies to this fund, and it's not transparency, and I think taxpayers who are strapped for cash right now deserve to have that transparency. So I think to say that, of course, bonding should only be used for significant capital improvements. But right now, we have a ton of projects on the books. A swing bridge in Norwalk that, is not functioning properly, deteriorating bridges. So we have a lot of things we obviously have to pay for long term, but I think there's just a level of dishonesty in Hartford where we're just not being very clear with the numbers, and I think it's imperative we have an individual in Hartford that will make sure that nothing but transparency is just a part of our budgets.
Thank you. You don't have a whole lot of minutes left, somewhere around 4 or 5 each of you. So you might want to consider that over the next couple of questions to get a few more topics in. Along the lines of the state's debt, everybody is staggered by the underfunded pension liability. What should be on the table to reduce the state's liability to its employee pensions? First person this time is Ms. Wright.
Well, the state has a responsibility to provide for the retirement of its employees, and our long-term liabilities are significant, and underfunding during the 1990s has left our systems precariously underfunded. We have fully funded the state employee retirement system to the actuarially recommended amounts in 10 of the last 13 years. The teachers' pension fund has been fully funded to the required annual contribution amounts since 2006. So we are making progress in a more disciplined and sustained approach to close the funding gaps in those funds. After peaking with the retirement of Tier 1 employees, who account for 72% of the retirement system's pension liability, the cost curve will flatten. Various concessions and benefit changes negotiated with CBAC in 2009 and 2011 already are helping to achieve a more sustainable annual funding contribution levels. But we need to be vigilant and continue to re-examine those benefit levels to reflect the new economic reality going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Baumgartner?
Well, if I were elected representative, I would make sure that we are fully funding the legislature's share of the pie to our pensions. It's always vastly underfunded. If it were fully funded, we wouldn't have the conversation about why our unfunded liabilities are just billions of dollars. So most importantly, we need to make sure that we get a treasurer and a system in place where they are making the right kind of investments. Teachers, firemen, police officers, they work hard day in and day out to make sure that our communities are safe and our children are educated. And I think the fact that the legislature this past year ignored the comptroller's call to fully fund the really Department of Correction workers, they underfunded it this year for the budget at a tune of about $52 million. So I think we can go on and on about what we're clearly not funding, but we need to make sure that we pay off our unfunded liabilities, because if we don't, our future will have to see tax increases. And right now, just as a young person and really seeing a lot of individuals who are young are really struggling to find jobs, at this rate, I don't think anyone will have the capacity to pay off these unfunded liabilities. So we need to make sure we have just smarter spending policies, and most certainly make sure that the pension system that we do have is paid for, so that really our hardworking men and women in this state get the retirement that they quite frankly deserve. But as far as making reforms to just the pension system in general, I think it's imperative, because if we don't, we'll see these issues year after year. So perhaps we should explore reforming just the right now most state workers are on a defined contribution plan. So perhaps we make it a choice for individuals to sort of opt into a 401k system. And ideally, we would have individuals in just the treasurer's office that would know how to invest our money. You'd think in a state where we have just a large number of hedge funds that the state would be making smart investment decisions, but we're simply not.
Could I just respond
Yes.
quickly? According to my information, we have been fully funding the annual required contribution amounts, generally speaking, for both of those funds for the last roughly 10 years. And if we sustain and continue that approach, the unfunded or underfunded liability of the State Employees Retirement Fund will be retired in 19 years, and the underfunded or unfunded outstanding liability of the Teachers Retirement Fund would be eliminated in about 22 years, according to current projections.
Then why did the legislature not fulfill the obligation, contractually obligated obligation to the Department of Correction retirees? Why didn't the legislature fully fund it, as the comptroller asked?
I thought we did, but
You're a member of the legislature, and they didn't. And so I think in this situation, you said, I thought you did. We did, and I think there's just a level of I think to an extent, and for...
was this part of the CBAC, the agreement?
No, the legislature underfunded the obligation because if they fully funded it, we would be in the red. And the budget was in a surplus. It had a surplus of about $300,000, if you call it a surplus.
As far as I know, we are fully funding these obligations, and which is a change of practice from previous administrations.
Thank you. We have a little bit of time left, and the question is a little different for each one of you because one of you is an incumbent and one is a challenger. But it also has a second part that you will both be able to answer with probably a yes or no. The next person to lead off is Mr. Baumgartner, and your question is, what experience do you bring to the office for which you seek election, and why should you be elected? And part two is, do you support term limits for legislators?
I think the state of Connecticut, again, is at a crossroads and need individuals who are cognizant of the needs of people, of everyday people. And I think to an extent, the legislators we have in Hartford have tried the same tired policies year after year, and I think the legislature could tremendously benefit from a shakeup in individuals who offer really a fresher perspective and are cognizant of the needs of everyone in the district. So again, rather than talking about term limits, I do hope to be a term limit this election, in part because, again, the district needs strong representation and energy in the legislature.
Thank you. Representative Wright, for you it's phrased by someone else. Why do you feel you deserve another 2 years in office, and what's your position on term limits?
Well, I ran for this office because I am committed to the community where I grew up, went to school, raised my children. I've served in local government, and I felt I could make a difference in improving the lives of residents and families in the community. As I said, I've played a pivotal role in a number of initiatives of benefit to the community. Most recently in launching the Connecticut Institute for Resiliency and Climate Adaptation at UConn, in securing more than $6 million for Grasso Technical High School.
Thank you. You will have a chance for your closing statement. We have a little time left for Mr. Baumgartner. Okay. Do you want to speak more on that topic?
Not quite, but again, I think we have a very difficult and important decision to make this November. I've been working very hard going door to door. And one concern that I've heard from voters is who represents us? I've been working very hard in New London, which is a new part of the district. But when I talk to voters in New London, a lot of them are frustrated, at least the ones who do know our representative, are very frustrated that when Representative Wright had the opportunity to participate in a forum that in a conversation in a committee hearing that addressed fundamental changes and comprehensive changes to pilot, she did not participate. And when you have a situation in New London where half of the properties there are not taxable, even if you don't agree with the legislation, you better believe you participate in those testimonies, in those hearings, and advocate for your district and offer an alternative, even if you don't agree with it. So I think the district is ready for a change, and I plan on offering it.
But you can take a deep breath because we come now to closing statements, and I believe you go first. You have 1 minute.
So again, I'd like to thank everyone in attendance. Right now, this state is at a crossroads, and I've said that over and over again, but I can't stress it enough. We are behind in some significant key metrics. We have the largest achievement gap in the state, a net loss in 2,400 jobs in southeastern Connecticut, and a transportation infrastructure that is lackluster compared to other states. We need to have individuals in the legislature who offer a different vision, who are cognizant of those needs, and will offer solutions and work across the aisle with Democrats, with Republicans, with independently minded individuals for the betterment of the district. So again, thank you very much for attending. I hope I can count on your support. So vote for Andre Baumgartner either on the Republican or independent party line. So thank you.
Thank you. Right down to the second. Ms. Wright?
Thank you. I've worked hard to promote strong schools, a healthy environment, and pursue a vision for a strong, broad-based, adaptive economy, taking advantage of the new economic opportunities that a changed and changing world provides, creating the foundation for our economic recovery and a stable and healthy economic base is a long-term effort and remains our top priority. I will continue to advocate for strategic investments to stimulate growth, strengthen our schools, improve our transportation infrastructure, protect clean air, clean water, and natural resources, for measures to reform the property tax and ensure prudent management of taxpayer resources at both the state and local levels, and to make sure that tax policy, economic policy, and fiscal policy all work together. I welcome the opportunity to work with my colleagues across the aisle and across the state. My commitment is to continue to protect and improve the economic security and health and well-being of Connecticut.
Thank you. Let's have a round of applause. A quick reminder.